Hello, my name is Paul Marchbanks, and this is Digging in the Dirt. A few weeks back, I saw a 2-minute trailer for James Gunn's Superman, and I started to tear up. Previews have sparked genuine excitement before, but managing to turn on the waterworks in less than 2 minutes, this has never happened. Then I watched the movie, and my eyes misted yet again in response to the same image from the trailer. This has something to do with the storytelling, but quite a bit more to do, I think, with my nearly 50 years of experience with this character's various incarnations and its Christological echoes. As Pop Culture Happy Hour's Glenn Weldon writes in Superman, the Unauthorized Biography, the decision of creators Siegel and Schuster to describe Superman as a sleeping babe when he arrives on Earth evokes for many the image of Jesus in the manger. My first encounter with Superman did not involve either comic books or the animated hand-drawn Fleischer short films that originally appeared in the 40s. I met Clark Kent through Richard Donner's Superman in 1978. I don't recall seeing the blockbuster in theaters, but collecting movie cards indelibly inscribed certain screenshots and advertising stills in my mind, well before I had a chance to re-see the film. And an action figure placed in the center of a cake Mom had made for my 8th birthday granted me the freedom to position this most powerful of superheroes in a variety of action poses that intimidated my poor, much smaller Star Wars figures like this Tusken Raider. Dad made this party particularly memorable, taking a few hours to craft Superman-themed decorations instead of purchasing official paraphernalia at the supermarket. The cost-cutting measure made an indelible impact. Using ruler and drafting triangle, he constructed a precision replica of the S emblazoned on Superman's chest for the kitchen table, and drew the same insignia on a host of styrofoam cups using a red felt-tip pen. The most powerful scene for me, then and now, is the moment where Superman fails to reach Lois Lane in time to rescue her from a car that falls victim to an earthquake caused by Lex Luthor. The ridiculousness of Superman's reversing this tragedy by repeatedly flying around the Earth so quickly that the globe spins in the opposite direction and time flows backwards does not undercut Superman's poignant, heart-rending grief as he holds Lois's body in his arms. For me, the moment evokes the verse, "Jesus wept," which expresses Christ's deep sadness when confronted with the dead Lazarus's grieving sisters. This, despite the fact that Jesus knows he's about to resurrect his friend from the dead. The film underscored the idea that great power does not erase emotional vulnerability. Superman 2, which Donner shot the same time as the first film, imprinted itself through repeat viewings from a worn VHS tape I used to capture the movie when it showed up on network television. All kinds of memorable moments precede that strange kiss that closes the film by wiping out Lois Lane's memory of Superman's secret identity. Miss Lane's discovering Clark's secret while the two are on assignment at Niagara Falls. Superman's using his entire bag of tricks during an all-out battle with Kryptonians in the streets of Metropolis, including super strength, heat ray vision, and gale force breath. General Zod's walking on water, and later correcting the dismayed US president when he kneels before Zod and says, "Oh God." "Zod," the general replies. More memorable than all these scenes, however, is that moment where Clark Kent falls to the floor in a diner after being struck by a misogynist jerk who was aggressively hitting on Lois. Having just given up his superpowers so that he can live normally with the love of his life, Clark gets his butt handed to him and sees his own blood dribbling from a busted lip for the first time. The godlike hero has willingly become a vulnerable human whose strength no longer matches his courage. Unlike Jesus, though, who embraces his human weakness on the cross, Superman has to get his powers back to achieve victory in a rather pitiful, anticlimactic battle in which he kills his adversaries. John Williams' score, however, continues to lift the action higher than the closing visuals deserve. Williams' musical genius, which provided both films with backbone even when the action was silly and the dialogue faltered, so penetrated my musical imagination that while swimming competitively in college, I could rely on listening to Superman's main theme through a portable CD player to get pumped for the 200 IM or 200 breaststroke. Christopher Reeve's return for the third and fourth movies wasn't enough to earn these films a place on my adult self's movie shelf. Superman 3 contained too much of the goofy humor I had disliked in the second half of the first film, and while I appreciated Reeve's effort to tackle a political issue that really mattered in the fourth film, Superman tries to end the threat of nuclear holocaust by throwing the entire world's arsenal of missiles into the sun, the direction and execution were so poor that I was immediately fine with forgetting the second half of this series. 2 decades would pass before another Superman film finally landed in theaters, during which time he lived on the small screen in a number of guises. The year I graduated college and moved to Austin to be near Tracy, Lois and Clark arrived, a fun TV series that lasted 4 seasons, well into the first years of our marriage. I'm not going to pretend that we could closely identify with the couple. Tracy's no high-powered reporter, though she is a great writer, and I'm an action hero only in my dreams. But we did appreciate the fictional couple's commitment to negotiating a challenging relationship. The first year of our marriage was pretty rough, and it helped to see even extraordinary characters wrestling with the ins and outs of romance. Smallville also majored in the day-to-day troubles of Clark Kent instead of focusing on his superhero exploits. Backtracking to Clark's adolescence and early adulthood allowed the creators to humanize our hero still further as he dealt with troubles familiar to all of us. Unrequited love, issues of trust and close friendships. Lex Luthor is actually a friend in this series. The longing to be appreciated for who you actually are. Figuring out how to honor your parents while remaining true to yourself. These challenges were much more interesting to me than the monster of the week paradigm, which the show lifted from the X-Files and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. In 2005, comic book writer Stephen T. Siegel published the graphic novel It's a Bird, narrating his own recent hesitation to write Superman comics for DC given the superhero's uninteresting near omnipotence. Superman may have famously died in the comics back in 1992, but he's always presented writers with a conundrum. How do you pretend that a bulletproof character who sees through walls, shoots powerful heat rays from his eyes, and flies faster than light can actually be defeated? Kryptonite is just too facile a solution to this narrative problem. I won't spoil the plot of Siegel's tale because I want to encourage you to read it for yourself. Suffice it to say that he compellingly configures Superman as an outsider, an immigrant who must hide his true identity, creating a loneliness harder on him than the punches thrown by superpowered villains. Siegel also manages to deftly weave in issues surrounding Huntington's disease, which is why I taught this book in a college course on representations of disability soon after the graphic novel's release. Now, Tracy and I didn't watch Superman, the animated series, which launched in 1996, until we had kids on our hands, at which point we were all watching the very good Justice League and Justice League Unlimited cartoons of the early aughts. What I loved most about these 2D representations of Superman were how the creators dialed down Superman's powers so that he occupied the same playing field as Hawkgirl and Green Lantern. When this Superman stepped up to battle the latest superhuman malefactor, there was a very good chance he'd be sent packing or completely knocked out. Unlike other incredibly powered heroes like Captain Marvel, who had to be kept out of the film Avengers Endgame until the very end because she's just too powerful, adding Superman to a team of heroes always risks the audience's disbelief. Really? Superman needs help? As a parent who embraces Jesus's words, quote, "Greater love has no one than this, that they lay down their life for a friend." That's from John 15:13. I eagerly shared this more vulnerable Superman with my younger daughters, because when this version of the hero stood in the gap, there was very real risk to himself. These superheroes put their lives on the line, and sometimes lost them. Our kids were too young to attend Superman Returns when it arrived in 2007, but my parents and I loved how it built on the foundation of Richard Donner's films from my childhood, elevating our hero's continued dealings with both Lois Lane and Lex Luthor. I was also struck by an important addition to Superman's cinematic lore, a sequence that combined Superman's loneliness with his even stronger sense of compassion. The director, Bryan Singer, had recently worked wonders with the first two X-Men films, stories about mutant outcasts who find refuge from public hostility in a closely knit community at Professor Xavier's mansion. Singer assigns that same outsider status to Superman, who, having learned that his old flame Lois is now building a life with another man, beats a hasty retreat to the sky. Instead of isolating himself further by, say, disappearing to the moon, Superman puts himself in orbit around the planet and begins listening to humanity with his super hearing. Once he identifies a need, he takes off to intervene at supersonic speed. He's no Jesus, but the portrait of a man of sorrows, listening to the world's plaints and putting their needs ahead of his own, gave me goosebumps. When Zack Snyder's Man of Steel struck in 2013, it hit Western culture with such force that it split fandom in two. I was particularly primed to enjoy it as I had just read Glenn Weldon's history of the hero, and the film exceeded my expectations. Most everyone I've spoken to at least enjoyed the updated design of Krypton, Henry Cavill's take on Superman, Amy Adams' Lois Lane, and Hans Zimmer's music. If you don't know the music, check out Flight from Zimmer's score. This piece vies with John Williams' main theme for Superman as my favorite piece of superhero music ever. What so disturbed half the fan base was the decision to put Superman in an impossible situation, one in which he must kill Michael Shannon's excellent haunted version of General Zod in order to save lives. The battle between Superman and Zod's troop of Kryptonians has by this point already decimated much of Metropolis, toppling innumerable high-rises and killing hosts of innocents. Some viewers thought Superman should have somehow relocated the battle to a nearby desert to minimize the loss of life. But those of us looking for gritty, more realistic scenarios in what is admittedly fantasy appreciated a storyteller willing to depict what would actually happen if such superpowered individuals existed and battled on our planet. Zod, who's intent on terraforming Earth in a fashion that will kill millions, could care less about collateral damage as he fights Superman, and our hero does whatever he can to minimize loss. To me, Superman's grief at having to kill his enemy was definitely worth the mark against his status as a model of kindness. I'm going to skip over Batman vs. Superman in the Justice League film where Cavill returns as our colorful caped friend. I think they marred the excellence of the first film in the same way the latest Deadpool flick forever altered the originally moving ending of James Mangold's Wolverine film Logan. And no, I haven't had a chance to take in the other Superman TV shows of the last decade, neither Superman and Lois, Krypton, or the animated My Adventures with Superman. Enter James Gunn's own Superman, a film intended to initiate a new slew of DC films the same way The Incredible Hulk and Iron Man launched the Marvel Universe. The film opens with our hero bleeding from the mouth after suffering his first defeat, an image similar to what Superman 2 provided 45 years earlier. Like the cartoon Superman my daughters met as young kids, Gunn's Superman is not all-powerful. He can be hurt, emotionally too, as when the public turns on him and assumes the worst about his motives despite all the good he's already accomplished. Gunn really plays up the now familiar idea of Superman being a foreigner, an alien, whom Lex Luthor prefers referring to as an it. This, and the invasion of fictional Jarhanpur by the aggressive nation Boravia, provide the film with some of its more obvious commentary on the current geopolitical moment. At the same time, in many ways, James Gunn's Superman effects a tonal 180-degree turn from the hard-hitting realism of Snyder's vision, a shift signaled early in the film when Clark says, "What the hey?" to his father. This flying superhero's down-to-earth goodness grounds him in values many of us will appreciate, including a compassion that keeps him from killing even the murderous liar Lex Luthor, and which makes him desperate to save lives whenever possible. Many a toppled building does not high casualties make in this film. Superman saves quite a few bystanders, a superpowered pet, and a cat stuck in a tree. He even cares about the fate of those robots who maintain his fortress of solitude and cannot return his concern. They tell him straight up that they feel nothing for him, yet still he cares. It is this unwillingness to allow any destruction he could prevent which defines our caped hero in Gunn's film. He cares about everyone. This is why he intervenes to prevent warfare across the Atlantic, because, as he angrily observes, people were going to die. When the invasion he shut down gears up yet again weeks later, kids whose lives he saved know whom to call on. In the scene that reliably misted my eyes, my eldest daughter next to me cried too. A few children strap a rag with a big S onto a stick and wave it in the air, crying out for the return of their savior. One child even closes his eyes as if praying, and Superman responds. Instead of dismissing unjust death as an inevitability in our broken world, something far too easy for me to do when glancing at the latest stats on the wars in Gaza and Ukraine, Superman inserts himself without thinking about the political ramifications of his actions. The lengths he goes to protect a vulnerable child at his own expense late in the film makes it clear what this new incarnation of the storied superhero is meant to represent. He sees every life as fearfully and wonderfully made, and will do whatever he can to preserve it. Where will James Gunn's DC universe go from here? Will Superman's bright-eyed optimism be tempered by arguments with a more somber and pragmatic Batman? Will the inevitable tragedies we just know will unfold in later films ultimately shatter his idealism or bolster his unwavering love for others? What do you think likely to happen? What do you want to happen? What do you need from Superman?